General Ben Hodges, which will be out over the weekend. But I also thought it would be fun to do a stream, to do a live stream and sort of debrief, review some of the key takeaways. So those of you who are really interested in this aspect of international relations, geopolitics, Ukraine, and so on, can sort of drop your thoughts in the comments. And we're also going to be joined by a fellow YouTuber, someone new who I don't think has joined the show before. It's Operator Starsky. Hello, how are you?
Hello, my friend. Thank you so much for this opportunity and privilege.
No, it's lovely to meet you. I don't think we've I think we've interacted briefly, but I don't think we've ever actually done a stream or something like this together. So it's awesome to be doing it with you now. So as I said to sort of the audience before before introducing you, I think it would be quite interesting to sort of just have a half an hour session or something to sort of debrief, take a look at the key takeaways from the NATO summit, right? Because it's been pretty pivotal, I think, in some ways. What stood out for you in some of the proceedings in the past few days?
First of all, of course, everybody's happy that we will receive opportunity to build PAC-3 missiles for Patriots. Very, very important thing. Of course, I can only welcome this decision, of course, but I would welcome even more decision to deliver more missiles to Ukraine at this point, because as President Zelensky said, we will have new package of missiles, but unfortunately, there will not be enough of those to intercept Russian ballistics, because we literally have like 10, 20, hopefully 30 missiles from our partners. Currently, the whole world understands the necessity to have such missiles that intercept drones and also intercept Russian ballistics. But the problem is, of course, the fact that in order to launch the production of PAC-3 missiles, we will have to spend a couple of years at least. I talked today about that on UATV, and basically the president of Ukraine says that it will take more than a year. Different experts say that it might take up to 2 years, like optimistically speaking. And of course, in 2 years, we will need some other solutions. So maybe we will get more air defenses from our partners. I'm talking about the SAMPT, basically the systems that are able to intercept ballistics, which is again very, very important at this point. But who knows? On the other hand, I believe that such negotiations already took place during the NATO summit, because again, the defense aid to Ukraine is not always public, so hopefully we will receive some of those. At least I hope so.
No, for sure. And you know, the Allies pledged 70 billion more in military equipment, assistance, training for Ukraine, with that to be sustained to at least an equivalent level in 27 as well. And that's on top of the 95 billion that was pledged in January, right, as a loan. So it looks like Ukraine's going to be getting a huge amount of additional financial assistance here, which they can be used towards purchasing or developing in-house capabilities, right?
Yeah, another interesting fact that I noticed was very, I cannot say suspicious, but maybe just a bit suspicious change of narratives from the United States current administration towards Ukraine, towards President Zelensky, towards generally the situation. I personally connected with the fact that most probably Laura Loomer also changed her position, and we know that she's a pretty important person in the Republican Party. So maybe that's the reason. But the fact that they actually accept the fact that they will need to escalate in order to push Russia to negotiate, that sounds actually very, very interesting. Not a lot of even our European partners use this rhetorics, because as we know, the European partners try to avoid escalation so much, so they don't even shoot down Russian drones, even when they fly over their very own territory. Yeah, so this was unexpected. I still don't know what happened, but we can see that Marco Rubio, Kit Kellogg, and many others. J.D. Vance, something absolutely unexpected coming from J.D. Vance, who was, I would say, openly anti-Ukrainian, and he talked about Ukraine with, I would say, despise the way he talked about Bucha, calling it a propaganda tour last year. That was absolutely crazy and insane. But he also changed his rhetorics. He basically said that, yeah, whatever Russia is doing at the front right now is not bringing any results. And basically, they show support to Ukraine the way we actually expected from the United States as our partners and allies, not some neutral body trying to, stand between two people fighting for whatever reason and just talk them to negotiate and stop fighting, but actually partner, actually somebody that you can rely on. We will see, maybe this rhetoric will change after Trump's call to Putin, because we know that such things happen from time to time, right? But I actually expect that the United States will be supporting us even more. We can also see important support coming from the representatives of the United States in the United Nations. Okay, so they are also very much, I would say, pro-NATO and pro-Ukrainian when they talk, for example, to Russian representatives. Again, something very unexpected coming from this administration, but I cannot say that I don't like it. All right.
No, it's I don't know. I keep trying to find a sliver of hope around Trump coming round, and it's genuine and it's sustained. But at least a lot of my comments and my audience, perhaps the same with you, are always like, stop trying to sanewash this guy. Stop trying to give him a sort of wiggle room. He clearly doesn't have any intention of really. He just wants to be on the side of the winner, right? And because Ukraine has the momentum right now, because the pivot, the pendulum has shifted in Ukraine's favor, quite favorably at the moment, comes like, oh yeah, Team Ukraine, let's go. I don't know. The Patriots are a nice idea and thing in theory, but yeah, it's going to take a while for them to come online, so to speak. So what else stood out for you in this? Because Zelensky his speech was very notable. A couple of days before, he talked about the fact that the war is going to be determined in the aerial theater, most of all. Do you think that is increasingly the case? Because I saw some pretty damning footage of the Black Sea the past day or so. Ukrainians are really taking it to the Russians at the moment.
Yeah, we hit, I believe, 49 ships over the past week. It's absolutely insane. In my personal opinion, and the Russian reaction was actually very cringy, because I believe in, oh my God, I don't remember the name of the community, one of the known ones in Russian Telegram, but they said, so what can we say about Ukrainians striking all of our ships? We refuse to believe this. So they just, like a little frog crossing the road, they just close their eyes and pretend that nothing happens. And basically, if you pretend nothing happens, then it's fine. So I completely admire the way Madjar actually does this operation against the Russian Navy. Another interesting moment that I noticed during the NATO summit was speech from Erdogan, okay, because Turkey also tried to be like more or less neutral. They showed the signs that they keep within the NATO direction. All right, they keep being part of the team, but when it comes to Russia, they would be usually like more or less neutral, trade here and there, right? And during this summit, Erdogan actually said that, we support Ukraine, we are ready to provide the platform for negotiations and stuff. I would say pretty much encouraging because again, Russians try to portray Erdogan as like they are like best buddy, all right, sometimes, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work, and actually, the Russian response to, first of all, Trump's decision to give Ukraine license to produce PAC-3 interceptors, and generally the position of current administration, the White House, towards Ukraine. Russians hate it very, very much. I noticed that they were nagging. I believe they still nag in the Telegram.
I'm on mute there. No, I mean, look, I think that the Ukrainians shift through their drone warfare, especially the pressure they're putting on Crimea, is remarkable, right? This overall pivot that we've seen in the past few weeks alone is the pressure that's growing on the Russians down there is hard to sort of comprehend it in some ways, and the Russians are sort of trying to escape. We're seeing tailbacks on the bridges all the way to the Russian mainland and such. So I'm quite interested in how you look at the situation with Crimea, the developments down there, because you covered that a lot, obviously, in the context of the NATO summit. Do you think that that's going to galvanize them more, or they don't really matter what goes on between the two?
So Crimea is effed big time. We can see that at this point, like 70% of the peninsula has absolutely no electricity. I believe somewhere in like eastern part of Crimea, one city only has electricity at this point because it's Kerch, I believe Kerch, because it's more or less connected to the Russian mainland. But the rest is absolutely, I don't know what to say. The situation with the fuel, when they just drop their cars in the queue for like 3 days, expecting the fuel to actually arrive, but it doesn't because their ferries burn, and then the fuel trucks also burn, trying to get to Crimea by land. It's spectacular to see, actually. Something that I didn't really expect back in 2025, but we can see that the mid-strike campaign works really, really well. And of course, losing Crimea will be probably something that Putin won't survive. I completely agree with General Ben Hodges, who also says the same, that basically losing Crimea is a huge punch to Putin below the belt. And also the fact that the Russians who arrived to live in Crimea bought property, bought houses and stuff, and enjoy life. The way they cry and nag about it in the social media, again, it doesn't help Putin's image, if you know what I mean. So I believe that another fact that Russians were conducting defense military exercises, they had a war gaming, and they were reenacting the possible landing on the shore in Crimea. It also tells that Russians are preparing for this scenario. And of course, the question is, how possible is this? But one thing that we already eliminated, which I would say put this plan in danger, like possible plan of landing in Crimea in order to take it, was the Russian Black Sea Fleet, because at this point the Black Sea Fleet is sitting somewhere in Novorossiysk, and they're afraid to even travel from the ports, because they're afraid of Ukrainian flying and swimming drones. So I am looking forward to see actually Crimea collapsing and Putin collapsing together with this, because everybody understands that if Putin loses Crimea, basically he's not a living human being after that.
No, I was kind of interested actually to go into the Russian angle a little bit. I cover it particularly from the economic standpoint and the overall shift in the balance of power, great power politics. And, you know, the Ukrainians spend about, what, 35%, 34.5% of their GDP on on military expenditure. The Russians about 7%. But what's crazy is that the Russian economy is failing so badly, and I think that the civilian economy is now being propped up by the war economy. Right, the war economy is so deeply entrenched; it's so underpinning of everything else that as the Ukrainians continue to strike deeper into mainland Russia with the on various targets, it makes it impossible. They're having to ration their own fuel. They're having to limit exports or just stop them completely. There's queues, tailbacks for miles, ages to just simply get, access to basic amounts of petrol, diesel, and so on, and at heightened prices. So, what's your sense of what the Ukrainians are going to continue to do in the next few weeks over the rest of the summer to try and increase that pressure even more?
First of all, I completely agree with you. And, to me, it was also very, very surprising to see Russian economy and Russian fuel industry and fuel market collapsing so fast. I think that it may be professional, because you always try to think objectively, and that is why I try to avoid being overly optimistic about something. Try to always be, like just a tiny bit pessimistic. All right, we know that Russia will face a critical year. All right. This year, 2026, it will be critical for Russia in terms of artillery, in terms of its vehicles, and yada yada. But still try to be like more or less like just a tiny bit pessimistic in order not to disappoint yourself. And currently we see that immediately after strikes, for example, on Moscovian oil refinery, immediately we saw massive queues growing in the Moscow region, in Moscow city itself. Then strike on Omsk. We can see that most probably Russia already had this deficit of fuel, because one way or another we were hitting the Russian oil refineries constantly and regularly, 2024, 2025. And currently we see that it started bringing results after those years of strikes. And at this point, when those refineries cannot process the crude oil, so Russia has to sell it to India with a crazy discount and then buy fuel for its front on the first place and then for its population. I think that it won't save the situation. As for the upcoming actions from the Ukrainian defenders, I believe that we will keep striking the refinery, because we hit all 9 of Russia's key refineries, the biggest ones, the major ones, and there's still plenty of refineries left. I believe that we already hit 25 out of 33 that they have on their territory, besides like those that are located on the east that are hard to reach. But considering the fact that the strike on Omsk broke 2 records, all right, because it was a record on striking the biggest Russian refinery that exists, and second record was the range of the strike, 2,500 kilometers, even more. So I believe that those refineries can be reached as well. Russians, by the way, still cry. They still don't believe that Ukrainian drones could actually make it so far, 2,500 kilometers. They say like, no, it was like Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, like those enemies helping Ukrainians. But I believe that we will keep striking their refineries. And again, there's a lot of targets. Russia is a huge country, which makes it very convenient to strike its important infrastructure, because when Russians brag about their country being very, very big, they immediately stop bragging when it comes to defending all this huge territory. And another interesting fact is, of course, it's an obvious fact, though, that Russians didn't believe that Ukraine was gonna do that, because Ukraine was never supposed to strike back. Ukraine was never supposed to strike Russian refineries, power plants, ammo storages, you name it, gas pumping station, fuel pumping stations, all that stuff. And Ukraine is absolutely capable of doing that. Also considering the fact that Russia is running out of its own air interceptors very, very fast, and a bunch of guys with Kalashnikovs and with manpads, they can't do much because you need those guys everywhere, on every single object, protecting it as much as they can. They cannot have never-ending source of missiles because you can only carry so much missiles in your truck. And also the fact that the majority of Russia's air defense is currently located in Moscow, with hundreds of Tors, S-300s, S-400s, Panzers protecting the, I don't know, Lenin's remains. And also, I believe around 30 air defense systems located around Valdai at this point. I'm not sure if they kind of moved out from Valdai. I've heard rumors like that, but I'm not really sure if that's true. But anyways, that's the thing. Russians cannot cover and protect their whole territory, and we will see more strike happening because the tendency is very, very clear. And I believe that everybody already can understand this, that Ukrainian military capacity, despite 4 years of absolutely atrocious war against this country, Ukraine's military capacity is growing. We're building new weapons, and we're expecting to build ballistic missiles. Russia's military capacity is declining day after day. They're already not using much tanks. They're not using much armored vehicles. The donkey cavalry that emerges here and there on the front line, all that stuff, the infantry on crutches and golf carts, it should actually tell a lot, even to those people who are absolutely skeptical about Ukraine being able to fight back.
No, definitely. One thing that I find rather interesting, and I'd like your quick take on, is that scrolling through X in preparation for our meeting, and you get commentaries from all sides of the spectrum on the war, but someone who seems to have an intent on pushing Putinist propaganda is Glenn Zen. I'm sure you know who he is. But he's written a tweet here saying, quote, "The vast majority of Ukrainians want immediate talks." That's true. I think there's a large proportion of Ukrainians who wouldn't mind exploring talks, but I think there's an even larger proportion, i.e. majority, that are like, we're not going to talk until we can see that there is a genuine intent from the Russian government, which there isn't, because Putin still leads it, and Putin has no intention of acting in good faith. So, I mean, what is the general sentiment you feel about how Ukrainians look at the war? Is there a resurgence of optimism because of how well Ukraine has been doing in recent months?
Well, currently, of course, everybody is very much inspired in Ukraine, considering that Russia burns from Rostov to Omsk, but of course the pro-Russian propagandists, what they're trying to convince the viewers is that the talks, in their understanding, is literally like give up. All right, hands up, we're giving up, we surrender, like do whatever you like, just stop killing us. It's completely wrong, because reality is, yes, Ukrainians want to negotiate, yes, we want peace, yes, we want to talk to Russians even today, just to ask them to get the hell out of Ukraine and basically stop the war. I believe it's a good reflection of what the Ukrainian society thinks. All right, Russians go like, what is going on? Where the hell is our fuel? Guys, stop invading Ukraine and everything will be fine. And we're ready to talk about it like today, like yesterday. We are peaceful people, all right? The Russians are trying to show a different picture. They're, of course, trying to show that the population is like begging the evil and corrupted Nazi regime of Ukrainian Jewish President Zelensky to stop the war, because they they don't care who will rule them, and the evil regime just wants to keep fighting because they enjoy it so much. And also somehow unexpectedly, they become richer. I don't know, like I served in the army 10 years, and I understand that specific companies sell weapons. There are specific distributors of weaponry, but generally speaking, all right, if you think about this logically, war doesn't make you richer; it can make you dead. All right, you spend on war a lot. If you look at Putin, who has like 50% of his schools require renovation at this point, because all the money go to war. Russia doesn't become richer because of the war. Like, it doesn't work like that. After the war, maybe, yeah, but during the war, you don't make money. You spend money like crazy, money and health. So that's very, very interesting to hear from Russians when they say that when they talk about negotiations as if Ukraine just wants to give up, but it's absolutely wrong. And I remember when like one of the key talking points among the pro-Russian propagandists who go like, well, Boris Johnson talked Zelensky into continuing the war, while in 2022 Zelensky could already make peace and everything would be great. But again, people don't really understand what sort of demands Russia was issuing to Ukraine, because basically it was capitulation and deconstruction of Ukraine as a state. All right, people don't understand that because they don't really read things like that. That is why it's very, very important to remind people that Ukraine was not given chance to talk, to negotiate peace, even despite the fact that President Zelensky already last year offered unconditional 30-day ceasefire to stop shooting, stop killing, and actually talk peacefully about the next steps. That's not what Putin wants, because Putin didn't start this war because he wanted peace. Putin didn't start the war because he wanted ceasefire negotiation. He wanted us to die. He wanted Ukrainians to die in mass. And that is the reason why he started the war. That is why any negotiations or ceasefires, they're not part of his strategy, and he will continue doing what he does because he has a military strategy, and it's very important to remember.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious on that though, right? How you, as someone who's been in the military for as long as you were, a lot of arguments are put that the Ukrainian, there's a lot of corruption in the military, at least on the middle, lower ranking officers. Is that true? Was that true? And how much has it been improved? Because from my understanding, the Ukrainians have made extraordinary improvements to the construction of the military, in the sense of how the battalions are formed, the different regiments and things like that. What's your thoughts on that element?
From my very, very personal experience, I realized that, in Ukrainian army, the people that actually do corruption, they are not very smart people. For example, in Russia, if you can lie, if you can deceive, and basically if you're like cunning enough for that, all right, if your IQ allows it, then basically you can do corruption, you can steal stuff, all right, at building, at construction site, like whatever. In Ukraine, it's kind of different, because in Ukraine, only stupid people do corruption, because smarter people, like people I used to work and serve with, they understand that we have the DBR, the state investigation bureau, that we have a number of different anti-corruption organizations. While they are not perfect, but they do their job well. And in Ukraine, we have like very, very interesting situation when like people don't have this, like we wear like the same colors, we wear uniform. That is why I will not report you for like stealing a bunch of ammo or shells or like fuel. No, they will report these things, because when you report corruption in Ukraine, it actually gives you a lot of benefits, right? And you're doing the proper thing. Everybody understands that, especially now when we are at war and corruption. It's a deadly crime. So besides the fact that corruption exists, Ukraine is fighting against corruption. You can see plenty of cases that are public, which is, by the way, another interesting point, because people don't percept the fact that they read about this or that corrupted person, or either an officer or a state serviceman, being imprisoned for corruption or tried for corruption. They don't really perceive it as actually a success story, because this is the way the democratic processes actually look like, right? They think that it's actually something bad, because apparently if you don't hear about corruption like in Russia, then it doesn't exist, but it's not the case.
I'm just seeing here as well a post by a fellow YouTuber, Preston Stewart, who was at the NATO summit and who we're going to be chatting with on Monday. Hopefully, guys, if you're interested, stay tuned for that. But he's sharing footage of another major refinery being, just shot to shit. And he's quoting one Russian military blogger, Maxim Kalishnikov. Oh, okay, Kalishnikov. Shouldn't have struggled so much there. But like saying that when you were in a reservist, right? What years was that? Was that in the mid 2010s or earlier?
When I was what?
When you were in the military.
I was in the military since late 2014 until 2024.
Okay, so this quote, I'm just reading a quote here. So would you agree with this interpretation? Could barely scrape together 17,000 troops and struggle to cope with a Starsky detachment, is now dismantling our energy sector. That comes from a Russian military blogger, which I think is kind of nuts to hear that. Does that show the scale by which the Ukrainians have really turned around their entire military and fortune?
I could say that the Russian bloggers are wailing so bad these days, because in Russian like blog sector, I don't know, in Russian social media environment, there's of course a bunch of propagandists. We all know that, and we all know that they all root for Russia. They don't root for objective information, because if they did, they would never, slap those Z's to their avatars and stuff and support atrocious Putin's regime. But at the same time, there are few of them. For example, the so-called angry Russian patriots, the associates of Igor Strelkov-Girkin, the one who is now in jail, even though like only years ago he was admired and blessed in Russia as a hero who liberated Donbass from Ukraine. Like those guys, they like to nag in the social media, because one way or another, I understand that they are Russian imperialists. They want Russia to win. They actually do. And the fact that they see corruption in the Russian army, they see absolutely ridiculous and stupid commanding the troops and sending them to the meat waves. They see people getting snatched from the streets in Penza, for example, and dropped in the buses and brought to the military draft offices. They understand that you don't win the war like that. And even though Strelkov he's a terrorist, he's wanted terrorist, and he's, I would say, a bit insane though. But at the same time, considering the fact that he was an FSB officer when his goons invaded Ukraine in 2014, he's not a stupid person, all right? And he understands that what Russia is doing right now, the Russians gain like very, very tiny progress in Ukraine, extremely tiny compared to what they did in 2022, when they would take, for example, 1,000 square kilometers on a daily basis. Now it's 100 square meters at most. And he understands that it's not because Russia is so great, it's despite the fact they have corruption and all the problems, despite the fact the tactic of small groups still works, until, of course, Ukraine builds more FPV drones.
What's the time frame for that? The FPV drone pipeline is again remarkable, and Zelensky, I think, has been doing a very effective job of leveraging it to the Middle East. Or sort of, I think one of the lesser covered elements of the summit was the signing of this deal with the Americans to help them develop their drone capacity. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, returning to Laura Loomer, that's exactly what she was talking in her telegram. She actually mentioned the difference between Ukraine's level of drone warfare, of building drones and utilizing them, and the level of implementing the drones in the American army. And immediately after that, several days after that, we can see actually Ukrainian military and American military discussing the drones and then signing different agreements. So I was surprised, but Ukrainian drone technology is something that every country in the world should have. I'm talking in the civilized world, should have and arm themselves with, because the war that European countries are preparing for, it's already a war of yesterday. We always prepare to the past wars. And the war that might actually happen, and that a lot of intelligence agencies were talking about, the Russia's invasion of Europe, that might actually happen before the end of this decade. Frankly, I don't think that it will be the war the way the Europeans imagine, because I keep talking about this all the time. It won't be a conventional warfare using the conventional military forces, tanks and helicopters, etc. At least not during the first stage. We will see hybrid warfare turning into an actual warfare, because hybrid warfare is something that NATO cannot react to using NATO doctrine and using conventional military force. And this is something we should get prepared to, because this will, of course, involve tons of drones, besides cyber attacks and besides terrorism, assassinations, and things like happened, for example, in Donbass in 2014, Little Green Man in Crimea. We will see, of course, drones being used massively. We already see, like Russia trying to probe different countries, launching drones over Denmark, over Germany, and other countries, over Norway. But we will see more of that, because Russia still has impressive number of Shadow Fleet tankers and other vessels, and those are, of course, can be used as launching platforms, which Russia is doing all the time. Even Poland recently talked about this. They talked about the Russian drones, and the fact that Russia is preparing something, some provocation against Poland, because Radoslav Sikorsky mentioned that Russia is using its vessels to actually map critical infrastructure and also sends drones to conduct reconnaissance over important targets on the Polish territory. So this is something that I believe the civilized countries should prepare to, and that is why they should cooperate more with Ukraine, learn Ukrainian experience. And this is a very, very important partnership, in my personal opinion, because Ukraine wants to contribute to the collective security, and Ukraine knows how to do that. And it will be extremely, extremely bad to see European countries actually losing this war, literally because they had chance to prepare it, because Ukraine offered, but for whatever reason they refused.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's shifting, isn't it? Like that. But I guess my last question for you simply is, I mean, I'd like to do this again with you very soon. I think it was a very wide-ranging but in-depth chat, and I'm so disappointed we haven't done it sooner. But what do you think happens now in the interim period? Not much, I think, is going to shift necessarily on the NATO front. I think Europe is taking the right steps, but of course the concern is always, are they doing it quickly enough? Is there a genuine intent to follow through on the pledges? I worry about it, but the sort of the Europeans falling back into their typical sort of like, well, we'll get round to it eventually, laissez-faire kind of attitude. So what do you think happens now? The Ukrainians just continue to target Crimea, up the pressure, and I spoke to one guest yesterday who suggested that he could see the Russians pushing for all-out mobilization. There's been a reduction of access to borders with Georgia, Kazakhstan, and such. Do you think that's coming? And therefore, what does that mean for the calculus in Zelensky's mind?
It's very good that you mentioned the mobilization. Of course, I cannot predict future well, but what I can say based on the indications and what both sides are talking about. First of all, we will see continuing Russian ballistic attacks. I will try to predict that Russian hybrid warfare, and specifically Russian disinformation, as well as Russia's ballistic strikes, even though they are not related or not connected at first glance, but they all depend on the Russian oil money. The more we strike the Russian oil money, the more it burns, the less we can see pro-Russian talking heads in the internet, because it's connected, and the less ballistic strikes we can also see on Ukrainian cities, because besides refineries and other critical oil infrastructure, Ukraine is also targeting the Russian military facilities pretty effectively these days. The one in Volgograd that was effed big time by flamingos, there was not even a single air interceptor launched at them, as far as I can tell. So we will see Russia trying to press Ukraine with its missile strikes and drone attacks. Unfortunately, Russia still runs the huge Alabuga factory, and striking Alabuga is not an easy task for one very simple thing. It's full of teenagers that were recruited in Russia and abroad, for example, in African countries. And generally speaking, even, when if we decide to actually strike Alabuga with whatever tools, with drones or with missiles, we should anticipate the Russian reaction, because, of course, they will immediately show that, a bunch of innocent teenagers were just making wooden pallets at Alabuga and Ukraine hit them. So this is a very interesting situation. I don't know how to solve it, but luckily I'm not the one who does. And another indication is that the mobilization is actually very much possible. I believe that it will happen. First of all, the fact that Russians were already snatching people from the streets because they are running out of convicts and maniacs and rapists for the Russian army in the prisons. They were snatching people from the streets, apparently trying again to probe the ground to see what the people's reaction will be to that. And we can tell that reaction wasn't that massive or impressive at all. And also, they spent 2026 actually updating their draft databases, updating the whole mechanism of recruitment. And there's plenty of sources in the Terrorist Federation currently talking about the preparation, the ongoing preparation for the mobilization. So I believe that in September, maybe October, immediately after the elections to the Russian parliament, we will actually see this mobilization. Will it help Russia? The mobilization of another, I don't know, 1 million men, will it be helpful to Russia? Well, you gotta ask yourself, how can Russia deliver those men to the front lines? Do they have enough donkeys to put, the rider on each on the back and send them into the midwave? Because the modern wars are not fought like in, I don't know, in Thermopyles. You don't just, send 1 million people marching to the position, because that makes Ukrainian artillerymen very, very happy when they see that. So you need vehicles that Russia is currently struggling with, and of course you need fuel to feed those vehicles. So the answer to this, will it help Russia much in this war? We will not see the front activizing much. We will see activization in some areas, but it won't be on the large scale. We will see the prolonged war, because at this point Ukraine is targeting the number of approximately 50,000 Russians improved on the monthly basis, because that's exactly what we need to make sure that Russians recruit less cannon fodder than they're losing. And the Russians actually will react to this with their mobilization. So it's not like the Russia's offensive in Ukraine will become more massive, bigger, more fierce. It will just become longer, because the Russians will actually have a resource of cannon fodder that can be sent over and over and over again into the meat assaults to the Ukrainian positions. And that's exactly what Russians need, because basically they build their whole doctrine, their whole strategy nowadays around the tactic of small groups, also known as meat waves. So that's just my opinion.
Interesting. Meat waves is not a term I've heard for well, never heard that term actually in all my time studying military affairs. Rather a grim one, but a grim one to end on nonetheless. Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciated it. And everyone for watching, of course, do check out Operator Starsky. You do a fantastic amount of coverage, daily, weekly. And I think it's very important to cut through the noise as you do so eloquently. And I hope we can do this again very soon. But everyone else for watching, of course, take care and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and be safe.
Yeah.